Ladies and gentlemen, despite all the injuries, despite everything that has happened in the world of the NFL so far, it is still week 3. We still got to set lineups. We still got to win you some leagues. And that's why we're here tonight on Fourth and Frames. I am Red Manuel. The gang's back together. My boy Nate Markham to the right. My boy Drew Scott down below me. Where tonight we're going to cover our week 3 smash, pass, and stash players. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Guys, welcome in. And if you are here tonight checking out this stream this week, welcome to Fourth and Frames. Don't forget to like, subscribe, review the Fantasy and Frames YouTube channel. So anytime a new podcast drop or a new short form video drops, or we have new rankings or anything, you can know immediately. Also, don't forget to lock in at fantasyandframes.com for the latest rankings, articles, waiver wire, super important right now, starts, sits, takes, news and notes. Guys, I just want to ask both of you before we go ahead and get into everything tonight. Are any of you currently in possession of being a fandom of a team that is averaging 46 points per game and has the most explosive offense in the NFL right now? Anybody? Raise your hand if you are. Oh, neither of you? Fellas, what's it like at the bottom right now? I need to know. Nate, go ahead and start with me.
I think you see on my tag, we're still 2-0. We being the Chiefs. I'm not part of the team, but I can say we because why not? And yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter. This was week 2, brother. And if the season ended right now, yes, you would get a trophy. You'd probably get a ribbon. It says most explosive. It might have frills. Who knows? Here's the thing. You know what I compare it to? The Saints offense is comparable to the pagers that were going off this morning. You didn't know how dangerous it was until it blows up. And unfortunately, I don't want to compare Hamas to the New Orleans Saints or bringing that up because that is terrible. But yeah, I feel like that offense at any point could just blow up. But I'm scared to bet against it, but I'm scared to bet for it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel trying to approach that. And I think the Rams might be the only team more beaten and bruised and battered than I feel personally. Like my entire mental health on the weekends is now in the hands of my fantasy teams because the Rams, I have no hope whatsoever. So this fantasy thing's all I got going for me whenever it comes to football now.
Drew, don't kid yourself. The Tutu Atwell Renaissance is alive and well starting this week. Man. Don't even kid yourself.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hold my breath.
Chardarius is coming, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. So, speaking of bruised and battered and beaten, guys, let's get into some news and notes this week because, I mean, my God, it's week 3 of the NFL season, and this list that we have right now is just unbelievable. So, I'm going to start by punching you in the gut, Nate. Isaiah Pacheco, out for an extended period of time, has a fractured fibula. They signed Kareem Hunt to the practice squad today. You probably expect Carson Steele or Samaje Perine to get an extended workload. Now that Pacheco is out for an extended period of time, what's your expectations for this offense?
Man, it's an unfillable void that you're not going to replace. So if I had to guess, what I would expect to see is more emphasis on the pass. I know defenses are going to assume the same. My guess is that Travis Kelce might actually make an appearance in the box score at some point, but I highly anticipate about a 20 to 25% jump in dropbacks for Patrick. And, it's a big loss, but I wouldn't go out and say that I think Carson Steele is going to replicate or replace any type of his workload. nor will Samaje Perine or Kareem Hunt. So it's about as big a loss as you can take for someone who was proven what everybody was concerned with, is that he could be a 3-down back and actually still do everything that he was doing so successfully. So yeah, it hurts, but it's Andy Reid will scheme something properly for that offense.
Drew, is Rashee Rice the obvious pick for the guy who benefits the most with this Pacheco injury?
I mean, he's kind of already thriving anyway, even without the Pacheco injury. So I think it's just more so a boost for some of the other guys like Kelsey or even maybe Xavier Worthy. You know, if those guys get to see more looks. I agree with Nate that I think that since there's not a clear replacement that's on the same talent level as Pacheco, why not just put the ball in the hands of your quarterback that is still the best in the league a little bit more often instead? So if I had to, I mean, by the time this airs, waivers would already have been ran. But if Nate, you can let me know if I disagree, if you disagree. But if I had to prioritize it, for me, it would be Perine and then Carson Steele and then Kareem Hunt. I've seen some people saying that they would prioritize Hunt over Steele today once the news happened, and I just don't really understand that. I mean, if they wanted Kareem Hunt, they could have signed him months ago. So I don't really know why he would immediately come in and leapfrog Carson Steele, who's already been on the team. But I don't know. Maybe that's incorrect. But I would go Perine, Steele, and then Hunt. But I don't think you should have high expectations for any of them.
I was asked by a few different people yesterday of my priority list and how I would do it. And I broke it down into two different ways, because some people have, fab, and with your fab, you can invest 1% on Kareem Hunt and stash him if you wanted to.
Right.
Carson Steele is going to go for more than I would like or feel comfortable for. Samaje Perine is probably already rostered more than Carson Steele is, but I don't think I would use, like, let's say you have the waiver priority where you lose your number one waiver. I don't think either one of those two were worth a number one waiver pick. But I still lean a little bit more towards Carson Steele if you're trying to replace, I think, the most important carries. The problem is Perine delivers on the most important touches, which are through the air. And I just don't know how many of those he's going to get. I don't know. I'm not overly excited about either. Not enough to make people feel good with my decision.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that's fair. I'm the same way, and I'm just like, at the end of the day, I think the pass game is where you want to be right now. I think these couple of Mahomes weeks where you've had where they've been sort of so-so. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, you will have a decidedly not so-so Patrick Mahomes game. And if you're starting to lose patience after a year, what's been basically a year plus of kind of meh Patrick Mahomes production, I think now is the time where if you're going to fire him up and feel fully confident, I think this is the time. So let's keep moving into yet another one, because we got a bunch of them. Deebo Samuel with a calf injury, expected to miss a couple of few weeks, whatever that looks like. Drew Scott, Brandon Ayuk has kind of gotten off to a slow start because he held out all of training camp. Do they kind of just have to start forcing that issue now? Or is there a Ricky Pearsall situation? Or is this a George Kittle and Jordan Mason offense? What do the Niners look like without Deebo Samuel, who has been probably, outside of Mason, their steadiest guy so far this year?
Yeah, I think the Ayuk ramp up was going to start happening around now anyway, naturally. I think it probably is going to have to get sped up a little bit, but it wasn't that shocking to see Ayuk get off to a slow start, considering he did miss all the offseason with the team with the contract thing going on. So it kind of sucks because he was going to be one of my favorite buy low candidates, but that's, Deebo being out is probably going to make that a little tougher. But I mean, if anybody in your league is still down on Ayuk and they're not factoring that in, I would go get him now while you can, because I do think it's just going to be more of the guys that you expect. Like, I'm not really expecting Jawan Jennings to get a lift or anything like that. Like, I think it's just going to be more Ayuk, more Kittle, more Jordan Mason. And I think it's going to be the main guys that drive this offense that see the boost. So I think the Ayuk time is coming. I thought it was already coming anyway, but this Deebo injury probably just speeds it up a little bit.
Is that this week, Nate?
Yeah. Man. I think so. I think it is this week. I think that it's hard to take anything away from the idea that they may just continue to hand Jordan Mason so many opportunities, but there's still enough targets. It's the manufactured targets that Debo was so dynamic with that offense still wants to predicate, players in space. And I don't know if you can just it's kind of like fitting a round peg into the opposite, square peg into a round hole. Do you try to fit another player into that role, or do you just change the offense just a little bit with Debo off? That's a question I would have for the offense as a whole. But Shanahan, if anybody's going to be able to figure it out, it's him.
Yeah, it's you saw what Marvin Harrison Jr. did to the Rams secondary this past week. That's who Brandon Ayuk gets to line up against in week 3. So I don't think there's anybody in that secondary that can cover Ayuk. So he's probably going to be in for a pretty good day.
I love the optimism for your team, Drew. It feels great coming off your tongue right now. It's wonderful to see.
A lot to be excited about.
Really briefly, Tajay Spears with an ankle injury. Tony Pollard has kind of commanded that backfield the first couple of weeks anyway.
He was already
next.
the guy.
Yeah. Justin Jefferson, thigh bruise / contusion. I would expect that to be a full go. I don't think there's any concerns there in terms of him playing or not. I just think that it needs to be listed because he is who he is. Kenneth Walker with an oblique injury. Zach Charbonnet. Not a great week last week, but he got some volume. Drew, I know you're going to talk about him a little bit later, so we're going to go ahead and shelf that for now. Cooper Kupp in a walking boot. Oh, Drew. Chicken Little syndrome. The sky is falling. Who is worth owning in that Rams offense right now?
You can throw a dart on any of them. I don't really know if it's going to matter. I think they're going to spread the ball out so much. But Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington, Colby Parkinson, take your shot. I don't really know if there's a right answer. I think Jordan Whittington's probably the most intriguing, just because he's like we've seen Demarcus Robinson for a while now. We kind of know what he is. Tyler Johnson, not to the same extent, but we're starting to get an idea. Jordan Whittington, we really don't know yet, so maybe he's the most intriguing because I don't know if the Rams even have the tight ends to be able to run more 2 tight end sets. Like, I think they're still going to operate out of 11 personnel a lot, just because that's what their offense is built off of. And maybe if Higbee was healthy or something, they might do a little bit more 2 tight end sets, but I don't know what to expect from this offense. I truly don't. The only thing that I think we can expect from this offense is that you're not going to be able to know what's coming. Like, McVay is going to take this week to figure out how to reshape this offense to try to make things work with what they got. And I don't know if there's a right answer. So I don't think that there's anybody you can pick up and feel good starting, but probably all those guys are at least flex worthy if you're in a bad enough spot, because somebody's going to hit. So take your shot.
Yeah, last two one we want to get to. Taysom Hill with a chest injury. As a New Orleans Saints fan, I know he's intriguing. I know he's fun. To me, he's never really played enough snaps to really be a fully plug-and-play fantasy option on a weekly basis. More of a guy you always want it on your bench in case those big weeks happen. And then lastly, Joe Mixon with an ankle injury. He was commanding quite a bit of work for the Texans before the pre-injury. If he misses this week, Cam Akers is the backup. So if Joe Mixon is out this week, it's wheels up on that passing offense, and we could possibly see 2 of those 3 guys between Diggs, Collins, and Tank Dell have big weeks, right, Nate?
Yeah, the Minnesota defense is no joke. We know that. But just being part of that offense and of any piece is beneficial. And I think that Cam Akers could be a viable fill-in, especially if Drew, you've seen some of the highs of what Cam Akers can be, but almost 5 yards a carry this year. Granted, it's, again, small sample size, but just being attached to anything. I don't know the order I put. Like, I'm really expecting it to it's always going to be Nico. I know that, but the Tank Dell Diggs back and forth could continue. I do believe at some point, maybe by week 5 or 6, we see Tank Dell firmly have that 2 spot, and Diggs will complain every week, and we will get sick of listening to it that he was complaining last year when he had 160 targets, and now he's on pace for 90, and oh boy.
Yep. Ayuk, Tank Dell, and Jamar Chase are my 3 favorite buy low targets. If there's any manager that's soured on any of those 3 guys, they're my 3 favorite receivers to target right now. I think that things are going to, if the routes run and things like that continue to go the way they have, I think Tank Darrell is just a matter of time before he breaks out. So I agree. But yeah, no, I think that Like Nate said, it was on a small sample size after Mixon went out. But, I mean, Akers came in and averaged almost 5 yards a carry, and he looked good in the preseason as well. And so I think he'll get a decent amount of work if Mixon is out. So he's definitely somebody that should be picked up across the board.
All right, guys. So that's our news and notes for the week. As you can tell right now, the NFL is a wasteland of injuries. But you know what? We got to set lineups every week anyway. So before we get into our smash, pass, and stash for the week, let's go ahead and talk about Underdog, formerly known as Underdog Fantasy, offering you, our listeners, free money using the promo code frames. You'll get a 100% match on your deposit up to $1,000. Guys, $1,000 in free money. Pretty good deal.
Sounds good to me.
Don't miss out on all the fun and all the action over on Underdog today. So, guys, this is why we're here on a weekly basis. It is a beautiful Tuesday. We're going to run this sometime later in the week. But we need to set everyone up for our week 3 smash, pass, and stash players. A smash player is a player that is outside of the top 20 wide receivers, top 15 running backs, top 8 tight ends, and top 12 quarterbacks that we feel confident starting. A pass player is a player inside the top 35 wide receivers, top 20 running backs, top 12 tight ends, and top 20 quarterbacks. And a stash is a player that we are intrigued by that is rostered in under 50% of sleeper leagues. So let's go ahead and let's talk about these smash players. And Nate, we're going to go ahead and start off with you. Arizona Cardinals looked pretty good on offense last week. Big Marvin Harrison game. It only took 2 weeks for us to realize that he wasn't going to be a bust after all. But that's not where you're going this week. So go ahead and tell us who your first smash player for the week is.
Yeah, I can't take Marvin Harrison. He doesn't fit in our parameters, but
you're right.
This game, if we were picking a game parameter for smashing, it would be implied point totals, bad defense on one side of the ball, and a team that's susceptible against a specific position. And this is, I feel like I'm late on getting part of the fun of speaking of Greg Dortch, but you know what? Better late than never. Week 3, perfect ideal matchup to do so. It's against the Lions. Slot receivers against the Lions have been just unstoppable. Granted, 2 weeks in, pretty difficult to use this as a barometer because week 1 was Cooper Kupp, week 2 was Chris Godwin, both of which are more than capable wide receivers. Greg Dortch isn't quite Cooper Kupp yet. I do think he will outscore Cooper Kupp this week. Sorry, low blow, Drew, but I move on. Chris Godwin, I don't know about, but I think Detroit should be able to basically chop up the Cardinals defense as a whole. I see this game going back and forth. I do think it will be another Marvin Harrison Jr. type of game. Might not be to the extent, but we're seeing Kyler Murray roll. I've seen the matchup against Detroit. Really, if you look at like a yards per or points per route run, if Greg Dortch runs just what I would expect, somewhere around 35 routes in this game, the matchup that he has, which is not exactly what I would consider difficult. Amik Robertson is allowing almost 0.3 fantasy points per route run. If you look at that, that puts him in a PPR scoring as a fringe wide receiver 3, more of a flex play. And that's all I'm recommending. I'm not saying, hey, he's your smash number 1. Don't take Marvin Harrison out. If you lose Cooper Kupp, if you lose any of the other names, and it's a wasteland out there. You're not going to find too many. And Greg Dortch sometimes might just be that guy that you want a safe. He's more of a floor smash than he is a ceiling smash, if that's a fair way to describe the Dortch. So, yeah, Greg Dortch, Detroit. I like a lot of pieces of that offense. And like you said, we promo code Underdog. If you want to go over to Underdog and you're looking for prop plays, a Greg Dortch over yardage or over reception is a good way to start.
I like it. You're muted though, Brett.
While we're at it, I just want you to go ahead and recommend this right now to Jorge that we go ahead and put a Dortch Smash shirt inside the Fantasy and Frame shop, because what a concept for a small slot wide receiver to just be smashing everyone and let it put Hulk arms in the process. I love the idea. So, Drew, you and I think we're about to fish in the same hole and in the exact same game for our next 2 smash plays. But we gave you the segue when we were talking about news and notes. Go ahead and tell us why Zach Charbonnet is going to be a success against the Miami Dolphins this week.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm making the assumption that Kenneth Walker isn't going to play. But I'll be honest, I'm a little worried that Zach Charbonnet might not actually be that good at football. According to Ian Harditz at iHarditz on Twitter, on the Twitter machine, Charbonnet is only one of 5 running backs that are bottom 10 in both the percentage of carries that have been explosive runs and the percentage of times that they were tackled for a loss of no gain. And only Kyron Williams has more carries without a rush of 10+ yards. But if Kenneth Walker is out again, I don't really think any of that's going to matter anyway. With Walker out last week, Charbonnet handled 96% of the snaps, 100% of the team's carries inside the 5-yard line. He only ran for 2.71 yards per carry across the 14 rushing attempts he got last week, but he had another 5 targets, turned it into 5 receptions, was able to find the end zone on the ground, and that was against a much more difficult Patriots run defense. In week 3, he's going up against the Dolphins run defense that's given up the 3rd most schedule adjusted fantasy points to the running back position. Now, part of a 2-week sample is the fact that, the James Cook 3-touchdown game is in there. So that is going to inflate those numbers a little bit. But Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, they both saw success against the Dolphins in week 1 as well. So with Tua not expected to play, I would expect the game script to be in Charbonnet's favor. I think that the Seahawks are going to handle this game, and there should be plenty of chances for Charbonnet to get some carries down the stretch as well. Again, all this is assuming Kenneth Walker doesn't play, but even if he does play after not practicing all week last week, not playing last week, I wouldn't be surprised to see closer to like a 50-50 split. And so Charbonnet could still be a flex play for you, even if Walker is active. But for me, he's a borderline top 12 running back with Walker out, and the Fantasy Pros Week 3 ECR has him down at running back 22. So with Walker out, I think you can be very excited about Charbonnet this week.
I love that call because the volume was there. The efficiency may not have been there on the ground, but at the end of the day, if guys are getting goal line carries, they matter. And those are easy ways to get fantasy points when you're getting those inside the 5 carries. So it doesn't matter what the efficiency looks like if you're getting goal line carries sometimes. It's how Zeke Elliott made quite a bit of his money last year. It's how Jamal Williams 2 years ago had 19 rushing touchdowns, and he was, on everybody's roster, making an impact. So, goal line carries at the end of the day do matter. And speaking of things that matter and things that we've been waiting on, fellas, we talked about him all off season. And last week, you guys remember the Toy Story? You remember Toy Story, the movie? Mm-hmm. Where mid-movie, Sid, he blows up his toys. Mm-hmm. And then there's near the climax of the movie. It finally came. The big one. JSN had the big one last week, guys.
He did.
Guys, 16 targets, 12 receptions, 117 yards. Okay, so people are going to get caught up on the less than 10 yards per catch. And to be honest, if you're playing in a PPR format and you get 12 receptions for 117 yards, at the end of the day, I really don't care that much what the yards per reception is, because that sort of volume is going to carry you. And it seems like we are finally getting in the place with a new offensive coordinator, JSN having a year in the league, that we're starting to get into that zone with him. Now, he plays the Miami Dolphins this week. And on paper, this appears like it's going to be a tough matchup because the Miami Dolphins have the 7th best pass defense in the league this year. So that looks tough. Let's admit that. But at the same time, JSN is also clocking in as a wide receiver 31 at the time of this recording. And if we're going to take it a step further, a large reason as to why that Miami pass defense is so vaunted, on the outside, you've got Jalen Ramsey, one of the best to ever do it, and Kendall Fuller, both very good cornerbacks. Can either of you name Miami slot corner?
Kader Kohu.
Okay.
I figured Nate would be able to.
That is impressive.
Sorry.
But Kader Kohu has given up 8 targets this year, which doesn't seem like a ton. But in his 41 slot coverage snaps, he's graded out at 30.6 according to PFF this year. Mm-hmm. If you know your PFF numbers, guys, that is not great. Let's take it further. Quarterbacks in those 8 targets have had a 109.9 passer rating against him and have averaged 14.5 yards per reception this year against Kader Kohu. And To make matters worse for him, last season he gave up 7 touchdown receptions.
Mm-hmm.
Translation: Kader Kohu, despite me never having heard of him, is quite gettable.
Yes.
And with the freak on the outside, that is DK Metcalf, always drawing attention, something tells me that despite the fact that this is a tough matchup, JSN is going to be in a position to thrive because Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are always going to draw attention. And when you're coming off of a 16 target game, that tells me we are a green light where wheels are up and we are going to trust this man. So for me, he's a low risk play as a flex because once again, he is a wide receiver 31. And in those flex guys, you're always looking for that upside. So at the end of the day, I'm firing up this week because those targets that will be taken away from Jalen Ramsey and a Kendall Fuller, they got to go somewhere. And where better than JSN coming off the game of his career and starting to establish that trust with Geno Smith.
Yep. Miami, 8th highest percentage of points given up to the slot position. 8th highest percentage of fantasy points given up to the slot receiver. So yeah, Will's up for JSN all over again.
Yeah, it's attack Kader Kohu because one, he's excitable. He'll try to pick off passes and that's beneficial for JSN where they don't just, catch ball, tackle player, get 6 yards. This is where he can get some yak because of his aggressiveness that is Kader Kohu. And Kohu's been known to miss tackles, etc. He's the reason I know him because unfortunately, in the IDP circle, he is a slot corner that was heavily targeted and he allowed catches. And when you get tackles because you allow the person to catch it, that's bad for real football, good for fantasy IDP football. And so that's how I know Kader Kohu. And I agree with you. JSN is an excellent play, much better than Greg Dortch as a flex.
So there it is. Those are our first Smash players. And Drew, I don't know what it is that we did this week. I don't think we collaborated on these at all, but we seem to be fishing in the same hole for 2 of our Smash plays so far. And even with this game, the one we're about to talk about, we're fishing at the same position. So Master Debation is back next week. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to make cases for both of the Cleveland Brown running backs right now. A little bit of a sneak peek. So tell us why you think D'Onta Foreman is the man this week against the New York Giants.
Yeah, we saw the tide shift a little bit last week. D'Onta Foreman went from not playing to handling a 59% snap rate in week 2 on rushing plays and 60% of the snaps in the red zone. He had double the rushing attempts of Jerome Ford and only 1 less target. They were only targeted 3 times combined, so it's not saying much. But as bad as the Browns might be, I think the Giants are even worse, and I think this is going to be another positive game script for Foreman in this backfield. I do think he is game script dependent to a sense where they're going to need to be in the lead or, possibly I think he's going to get the valuable carries around the end zone as well. But the Giants, they're not a good football team. That's not a secret. And they've also given up the 9th most scheduled adjusted fantasy points to the running back position through 2 weeks. And then according to friend of the show, Debro, over at Fantasy Pros at Debro_FFB on Twitter, the Giants have allowed the 7th highest explosive run rate, 5th most rushing yards per game, and 2nd highest yards after contact per attempt and missed tackle rate. So, I think he only played I think he was just under 40% of snaps last week after not being active in week 1. So if they do lead this game as well, I would only expect that snap share to continue to increase now that he's getting more and more acclimated to start the year. Foreman's going to be my highest ranked running back in the Browns backfield in week 3. I've got him up at running back 24 compared to the running back 49 expert consensus ranking. I don't have Ford as low as ECR had Foreman, but I do have Foreman as the running back to start in this backfield this week.
An interesting take, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to rebut that right away because for me, we're seeing the same thing. The New York Giants are a bad football team. But you mentioned explosive run rate, and you mentioned twice as many carries last week for D'Onta Foreman, and I love that for you. At the same time, would you care to mention to our beloved listeners what that yards per carry situation was like for D'Onta Foreman last week?
It wasn't great, but what do we talk about on this show? What do we follow on this show?
It was a
What
blitz.
is king? What is king?
Volume
finish
is
the phrase for
king.
me. Okay, thank you.
Volume is king, and at a blistering 3 yards per carry, he may not have that volume for very long, maybe not even this week. Meanwhile, my man Jerome Ford, while he was out snapped this week, and I love that you bring that up. You mentioned, Deontay Foreman carried the ball twice as much as him. Jerome Ford nearly had twice as many yards on half as many carries. You mentioned the explosive run rate of the New York Giants. Popped off a 36-yard run last week, into the game, 7 carries for 64 yards. That is 3 times the production that Deontay Foreman put on yards per carry last week, my man. So while you are saying there's a 60-40 split that Deontay Foreman could, in fact, be going with, at the end of the day, I've seen Jerome Ford produce in this offense last year. Even at his most inefficient, he was still a 4 yards per carry guy with a solid hand in receptions as well. And let's be honest, the Cleveland Browns are going to run the football because Deshaun Watson just is not good. So there's a chance for both of these guys to produce this week. But at the end of the day, we're arguing for guys on the same team. You fit all the high marks that I needed to hit in terms of talking about why Jerome Ford is a better play, since he is a more explosive player. So Nate, go ahead and give the people. We're back.
I want to say this.
We're back, baby.
I don't disagree that Jerome Ford is definitely the more explosive player. It's just hard to get me to care whenever the Browns don't care.
So Nate,
yeah, I know what you're gonna.
Before you get your smash play, give the people a preview, and you're gonna have to take a side right now. Die on a hill.
You're the judge.
You are going to be the co-signer of one of our takes this week. So, who's the better smash play, Deontay Foreman or Jerome Ford?
The ironic thing is, when I was doing my fades, both of them were in consideration because of this exact same reason. And I know that's not an answer, but I worry about the cannibalization of each other.
They both suck.
I know, both your arguments are terrible. Pick a different person. A little bit about Rhett. You use the the explosiveness. Unfortunately, the explosiveness also goes against a little bit in that if you take away the 36-yard run, then he had 6 rushes for what, 22, 23 yards.
Still more than Deontay Foreman, but go on.
Doesn't sound very efficient to me.
But in then week 1, his 3.7, same as Deontay Foreman. That being said, though, Drew, I know last week was like it looked like the changing of the guards. I still believe that there's a case to be made that if it turns into a high value touches, which are the the dump offs and the receptions, I don't think that Jerome Ford is on the field if he doesn't have those. So I'm going to have to say that Jerome Ford's going to go back to the reception, but I'm not anointing either one of you a winner. Don't raise your hand. Neither one wins. If both of you two punched each other in the face at the same time, you both went down, I have to look at and decide who wins, who loses, and it's a draw because I'm going to be the third mouth to say I'm fading both of them this week. Even against a bad New York Giants defense, I see cannibalization of both. Who gets in the end zone? Jerry Jeudy. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, if neither is your answer, that should be your answer. You should not be forced to tell our listeners they have to start one of them if you don't believe they should start any of them. So I think that's fair. But Red, it looks like you might be having a little bit of some internet stability issues there. So I will take your segue here because we have talked enough about the Cleveland Browns backfield. And Nate, I think that you're going to finally turn the tide and talk about a different backfield. So give us your second smash for this week.
Yeah, not one that normally at the beginning of the season I expected to be talking about by week 3. That's the exactly Tennessee Titans offense. I expected this if I had to say, let's go back in time 3 weeks and who's Nate's smash play for week 3 going to be, I would have believed it to be Tajay Spears, that he would have just taken this role because Tony Pollard was washed and wasn't the back that I had seen 2 years ago. Right. And I'm happy to admit I'm wrong. He's fully recovered from the injury that has, basically that's what Isaiah Pacheco similarity, there's similarities there, but he's looked great. He really has. And this Green Bay Packers defense, despite how good that front 4-7, if you count the linebackers at times, can be, they've been chopped up by opposing running backs. I mean, if you look in week 1, Joe Mixon had 30 attempts for $159. JT last week only needed to carry the ball 12 times for 103. And we go back to a little bit, we said earlier about Tyjae Spears and being questionable for week 3. Even if he plays, I think it's going to be a much reduced workload. And sure, the fingers are going to point and say, well, Pollard's already out producing, out touching Tyjae Spears anyway. But it's really on the routes that I think is going to be the significant part where Tony Pollard really can start to, make hay, as they say, in that Spears seeing 30 routes to Pollard's 33. I think that's going to be a lot more Pollard weighted. And we'll see a game that Will Levis would be smart to try to put the ball into, a playmaker's hands like Tony Pollard and try to move the ball a little bit. He's still working with banged up D-Hop. Calvin Ridley had some incredible catches. He had some bad drops. It's a work in progress, but I'm fine with Tony Pollard, especially considering I think this matchup is a sneaky good one that many wouldn't want to smash in. So I'm going with it. Tony Pollard, wheels up.
Yeah, I like it. Pollard ended up being one of the guys that I was targeting in drafts a lot more than I thought I would. I mean, whenever the Titans first signed him, I was like, oh, here we go. He's going to be way overpriced in fantasy drafts. And then the drafts get here, and Pollard and Spears aren't that far apart. It's like, man, one guy was just prioritized by this current front office and coaching staff and brought in, and they're basically going back-to-back in drafts. So Pollard ended up becoming a guy that I was drafting a lot toward the end of the year, and I've loved the volume that we've seen from it. And then, against Green Bay this week, he should be a smash play. I agree completely.
Yeah. Guys, are we good now?
Yeah, you look good. You're back.
Thank you. Yeah. Forgot to do the really smart thing that I do every week and plug in. Just slipped my mind this week, guys. Hey, we're not all perfect. We're tired. I raised 2 kids. It's fine. So that's our second smash play. Nate, I'm looking at the show sheet right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you left our third smash player blank.
I got a good one.
Color me intrigued. Let's have some fun. Hit the people and us with this surprise because we have no idea where you're going right now.
This is a third. It is a surprise. This is a smash DFS or underdog fantasy. You want to go over the props of both receptions and yardage. It won't take much to jump over this low bar. Here's what I got. We know many things to be true. Death, taxes, Carolina Panthers are absolutely atrocious. But let's look at week 3. I know it's Andy Dalton. Yes. Hold on. Andy Dalton can provide a wide receiver with a floor that might not be made of particle board a la Bryce Young. Might not be red hot magma, but it's going to be potentially stable. Let's go back in time last year to week 3. Coincidentally, what do the Carolina Panthers do? Yes, they bring in Andy Dalton, who produced the wide receiver 3 on the week that week.
I know where we're going.
He targets the slot receiver at an insane amount. Yes, you may have thought I was going to say Deontay Johnson, and many people are saying bye Deontay Johnson right now. But for a one-time, 1 week, one last ditch effort
last hoorah
for the old man's going to get back on the bike and ride. Adam Thielen is going to see 8 targets in this game. They may be for 40 yards, 5 catches, 40 yards. But if you need a DFS dart throw and you just want, and why wouldn't we want it? I mean, let's be clear. You throw Adam Thielen in your lineup for DK and you see, the old Red Rocket chucking the ball to Adam Thielen. And I know it's Red Rifle, but I say Red Rocket.
The Red Rocket is better.
It's so much better. Man. Exactly. It is going to be the most exciting, gross thing. You'll never watch the game. You won't watch that game. No one's going to watch that game.
I hope you don't.
But you're going to see in the box score, you'll be like, does Adam Thielen have 7 targets? And then that last target, wait, Nate said 8. And bam, it's going to be for that 5th catch, 40 yards, probably no touchdowns. Let's not get carried away. But
5 for 40 is a solid day for Adam Thielen.
Do you remember what Thielen put up last year?
I don't. I know it was the game against Seattle, right?
It was 14 targets, 11 receptions, 145 yards, and a score. As I said, he was the wide receiver 3 on the week, only trailing a 45-point production out of Keenan Allen and Devontae Adams, both of which had 20 targets that week. Adam Thielen, the name we never thought anybody would say. I feel gross. I wish my internet would have, kind of shit out on me a little bit so I didn't have to do it. But there you guys go. You can, I'll probably never see you guys again when you delete me from this show, but I understand.
Oh, you know what? I'm here for it. Fire it up, because you know what? There's some roster right now, maybe even multiple rosters, where Adam Thielen is sitting there rotting away, drinking his Ovaltine, eating his saltine crackers, and you just gave him the last vestiges of hope. And better yet, you may have given me the last vestiges of hope to perhaps fire that man up in a flex spot this week. So if my team's crash and burn this week, it's all Nate Markham's fault, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first.
Do not start him in your league. Or do. Who knows? Hell, I got broad shoulders. I can take a lot of it.
So let's go ahead and let's keep going. Drew, your pick for your smash player this week is decidedly not Adam Thielen. Go ahead and talk about him.
No, he might be the most exact opposite player from Adam Thielen. This is more of like a PSA to the fantasy community. I should not be able to put this guy in this segment, but his ranking is still low enough to where he qualifies for it technically. He's the wide receiver 7 overall through 2 weeks. And it's Rashid Shaheed, man. And I was so low on the Saints offense coming into this year, like incredibly low. And that would not have been the case if I would have known the changes that were coming thanks to Clint Kubiak. We stand a man that brings in change. But last year, the Saints were 32nd in play action percentage. They're first through 2 weeks this year. They were 25th in designated design rollouts, excuse me. They're first this year. They were 26th in motion at the snap. They're 5th this year. They are an actual 2024 NFL offense. They have joined us in the year 2024. The offense as a whole looks great, but Rashid Shaheed has been incredible, to say the least. He's still going deep plenty, as he should. His average depth of target is 18, but he's also been running some shorter routes. He's even had some screens called for him. And he has an insane 5.28 yards per route run. And I'm sure some regression is coming his way eventually. He can't keep this up all year, surely. But he's been the first read on 26.7% of the team's passing plays, which is the highest on the team. So the regression is going to be a little bit tougher to hit, at least in a dramatic way, as long as that continues. And especially whenever you consider the fact that the Saints get to face an Eagles pass defense that's given up the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the wide receiver position after both Green Bay and Atlanta had solid weeks the first 2 weeks of the year. So call me crazy, but I think the wide receiver 7 through 2 weeks that has another favorable matchup should probably be at least a wide receiver 2. But week 3, ECR has him as the wide receiver 31. I've got him up at wide receiver 22 for the week.
You know what? I'm going to co-sign that just because of my sheer bias.
I didn't figure I'd get a fight out of you for that one.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Like, I was sitting here in all these drafts. We went to the fishbowl and we saw Rashid Shaheed get drafted in the first round. And you heard me complain about it openly, Drew. I'm like, what are we thinking right now? And come to find out, I was completely dead wrong.
He's being underdrafted, apparently.
He was being underdrafted, apparently. The usage is there. It's exciting to see how they're doing things. It's excited to see 2024 coming to life in New Orleans, of all places. But you know what? I'm here for it. And so with that being said, I'm going to go to a decidedly not 2024 place right now. And I'm just going to go back to this Cleveland and New York Giants game because apparently I'm a sucker for misery. And we're going to talk some Devin Singletary and why he's a smash play this week. Guys, there are very few bell cow backs left in the NFL. Devin Singletary happens to be one of them right now. Through 2 weeks, he has had 94 snaps at the running back position. That is 7th most in the league so far through 2 games. Once again, I know it's a small sample size, but Who the heck is competing with him right now in that backfield?
Oh.
Absolutely nobody. He responded last week with 16 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown. And he's stepping into a matchup with Cleveland where they've given up a rushing touchdown each of the first 2 weeks. One of them to Travis Etienne. Okay, fair enough. The other to Zeke Elliott. What is going on there? They've, against the run, been decidedly middle of the road so far this year. So I'm going to bank on the fact that Cleveland has given up rushing touchdowns each of these first 2 weeks and say that Devin Singletary, a guy who has been high usage so far through 2 weeks and is getting the goal line work, should be able to find the end zone again this week. And in past years, he's also shown that pass catching ability. Just like with Rashid Shaheed, with the amount of snaps that he's running and the efficiency he's shown so far, it's shocking to me that Devin Singletary is currently ranked as running back 29 in the Fantasy Pros ECR this week. It should probably be more along the lines of that 23, 24, 22 range, a low-end running back too, considering where we are with injuries and everything. But you're getting value right now. So if you have Devin Singletary, it's a good time to fire him up, and you can put him out as a flex or get some upside out of that position this week as well.
So the Devin Singletary that's averaging 5.08 yards per carry versus the pedestrian 4.43 of Saquon Barkley. So what you're saying is by using a yards per carry metric that Devin Singletary is better than Saquon Barkley. If I'm comparing the Jerome Ford to Deontay Foreman conversation from earlier. So that's what I'm going to leave it at. That's what I heard. I will mute my I'm just backing that up. I've loved Devin Singletary coming in, and to see him getting that type of, the yards per carry is crazy. Like I never would have expected that, and I'm happy. I'm here for it.
Yeah. So guys, those are our smash plays for the week. Let's get into a couple of our pass players quickly. Like we said, those are players inside the top 35 wide receivers, top 20 running backs, top 12 wide ends, or top 20 quarterbacks. Nate, you just seem to have a passion for stabbing Drew in the heart this week. So go ahead.
Yeah, right.
And do it one more time.
I do. I'm sorry.
Twist the blade this time too.
This hurts. It's a very dull knife because I think that there's a pathway to be successful, but if you have a better option, I don't love Kyren Williams versus San Francisco this week. I know it's easy to look at San Francisco and say, yeah, but feels like they've given up a lot of yards and a lot of, big games in the first two so far to opposing running backs. And while they haven't been as stingy as what we've seen over the years, you just have to look at one area, and that's the offensive line for LA, or what was the offensive line there. It's in shambles. There's not many options. And I mean, I hate to say this, but while many will look at the injuries across the offensive line as an opportunity for Kyren Williams to see more usage, the injuries across the board, realistically, without Puka, without Cooper Kupp, I could see a scenario where, and I'm going to say the name Blake Corum, and many people hearing it, if you just immediately want to go to, well, last week was just garbage time. The usage is not indicative of future success or future touch percentage breakdown. But I do think that there's something there that wouldn't shock me entirely, is maybe, let's save a little bit of the tread on Kyren Williams, and maybe Corum does come in and spell him more often than not. Not saying that's the way it's going to be, but if I'm building a narrative in my head for why I think it could be a rough game for Kyren Williams, all of those pieces play out. The positive is that he could just catch a ton of passes like he did coincidentally last year in week 3 against the Rams or against the 49ers and put up all of his points that way. But I'm going to lean a no. And I'm going to say that if I have a choice to make, like, maybe you happen to have Jordan Mason, the opposite side of that, because you picked him up. There's plenty of other names I feel more comfortable starting. Sorry, Drew. I still love you.
You really don't have to apologize for that one. Kyren Williams was the only Rams player I wasn't high on coming into the draft process. And, he's basically been a touchdown dependent RB2 up to this point. And the percentage of chances of him having a touchdown, I would say, go down considerably whenever the offense as a whole is not as good as it is without its best offensive players, and they can't move the ball. So, that would be the case if they weren't facing an defense as good as San Francisco. So with the defensive matchup and with the offense as a whole, probably not going to be able to move the ball as much. I'm with you. I'm not as excited about Kyron either.
Yeah, and so Drew, let's go ahead and let's talk about a pass player for you. It may have been a person that I was high on heading into the season, and oh boy, have I been absolutely wrong so far. So can you just go ahead and now, since Nate has spent all this time breaking your heart, can you break my heart real quick?
Gladly, because this was the guy I was out on in draft season. So this serves as somewhat of a victory lap, assuming that I'm right, which he could also make me look very stupid. But so far on the year, Christian Kirk has weekly finishes as the wide receiver 69. Nice, but not so nice. And the wide receiver 112. Despite all that, he's still one of the top 35 wide receivers according to Fantasy Pros ECR, and I don't get it. I mean, if you put ETN into the mix, Christian Kirk is 6th among Jags pass catchers in yards per route run. He's 7th in yards after the catch per reception. He's 6th in first downs per route run, and he's fourth behind Ingram, Gabe Davis, and Brian Thomas Jr. in first read percentage. Like, at this point, we should not be trying to decide if we're ranking Christian Kirk or Brian Thomas Jr. higher. We should be deciding, are we ranking Gabe Davis or Christian Kirk higher? Like that should be the discussion. Brian Thomas Jr., he's the wide receiver one of this team, and there should be a bigger gap than just the 2 spots in the ECR that is between them in terms of wide receivers for the week. Especially whenever you consider the fact that they're playing the Bills defense that's giving up the least amount of schedule adjusted fantasy points to the receiver position through 2 weeks. The one saving grace, the one thing I'll give you, Rhett, that maybe you'll throw him in there for another week. He lines up in the slot almost 82% of the time this year. The Bills have given up the 4th highest percentage of points to the slot wide receiver so far this year. But even with that, I've got Kirk down at wide receiver 44, which I feel like is being kind, considering, again, he was the wide receiver 69, nice in week 1, and wide receiver 112 in week 2. So his ECR right now is wide receiver 35. I don't get it. I've got him almost 10 spots lower. I got him down at wide receiver 44. And if you can get away from him this week, please do.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you right now because I started in the first 2 weeks and I had to live that life. And it hurt. It hurt my soul. I drafted him in Scott Fish Bowl. I had to figure out a way to compensate for that right now. So, I am crying and smiling through the pain right now all at the same time. But, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get into a pass player, and I want to get into hot takesville real quick. And I'm going to tell you why Saquon Barkley is not going to be a start this week against the New Orleans Saints. So, Saquon enters the week as the running back 3 in the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings. And, yes, he's off to a great start. But you know what, guys? We're nothing if we're not fans. And I've been a sports journalist for 15 years, and I haven't been this excited about a Saints team since 2009. So you know what? This is my time to throw caution to the wind and just say F it. And sweet baby Jesus, is it fun to be a New Orleans Saints fan right now? Saquon Barkley is running into a defense that has always been solid and a team that is growing in confidence. He is also running into a defense that so far this season has been the 4th best against running backs in PPR formats at 11.1 fantasy points per game. Now, admittedly, let's call a spade a spade. I don't think Rico Dotto is quite on Saquon Barkley's level. Can we agree on that?
100%. We can agree on that.
Yeah, but he managed 59 total yards last week. He had 4 receptions against in his game last week against the New Orleans Saints. 59 total yards, less than 10 fantasy points against a guy that had 4 receptions. So you know what? Not a bad performance by the Saints defense. This is going to be a week just on a purely football level. We're going to find out a lot about both of these teams. The main question everybody wants to ask is, are the New Orleans Saints for real? And we're going to find out that answer surely after this week, win or lose. If they get blown out of the water, then maybe it's fool's gold. If they win in any way, shape, or form, people are probably going to say they're the real deal. But like I said, this is a Saints team that has been built on defense for years, and I can see a spot where they hold Saquon Barkley out of the end zone. And if you hold him out of the end zone at the end of the day, guess what? He has 6 less points than he would before. And that makes it a lot harder for him to justify that running back 3 ranking that he's heading into this week. So am I saying that Saquon Barkley is going to have a terrible week? Absolutely not. Do I think the New Orleans Saints have it in them to absolutely somewhat maybe stifle Saquon Barkley into being less than that running back 3? Hell yeah, baby. Lock it in.
Damn right. Do it.
Yeah.
Saints shut down Chuba Hubbard. Shut down Rico Dowdle. Watch
Miles
out,
Sanders.
Saquon. Yeah. Who are you? Add another notch on the board. Bam. Saquon. He's going to put up about 45 points on you. Just
I'm nervous. I'm nervous on Saquon to the tune. I have him way down at running back 5 this week. So I cannot condone this message. Rhett does not speak for Fourth and Frame as a whole.
Exactly.
But sometimes you gotta go out there though.
We're just gonna call this reckless week. Nate just came out with an Adam Thielen take. This is my Saquon Barkley is trash week take. So you know what?
More power to you, man.
Sometimes you just got to take everything with a grain of salt. But you know what? Even a broken clock is correct twice a day, baby.
That's
so
true.
Maybe this week, those 2 times a day are Nate Markham and Adam Thielen.
Damn right.
And me and Saquon Barkley. Never say never, baby. We are here for you.
Say never.
So, Drew, coming off of that very impassioned and inspired performance, go ahead and give us one of your past plays for the week, buddy.
All right. So this one I really don't take pride in because I like Michael Pittman Jr., the player. But if you haven't already, it's probably time to change how we're looking at Michael Pittman Jr., the fantasy asset, until we see some of the changes in the offense and with just his play in general. Fantasy Points Data Suite, they launched this incredible new stat, which is ASS, their average separation score for receivers. And so
that's nice.
There's 98 pass catchers that have run at least 40 routes this year. Michael Pittman Jr. is 93rd out of 98 in average separation score, illustrating just how much trouble this man is having in creating separation this year. The targets have been there. He's averaging 7.5 a game, which is the most on the team, and he still leads the team in first read percentage, but he's just not doing much with them. He's 3rd on the team in air yard share. He's 4th among pass catchers that have at least 10 routes run and yards per route run. Richardson threw the ball 34 times last week. The passing attempts are climbing, but with him struggling and with the defense he's going up against, he's got to deal with the Bears defense. It's given up the 4th lowest amount of schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to the receiver position. It's probably going to be tough to set him, but if you do have to start him, I would temper expectations. Fantasy Pros ECR has him at wide receiver 20. I've got him down at wide receiver 29, and I'm fading him this week if I can help it until I see that part of the Colts offense get right.
And I mean, yeah, there are also other options in the Colts offense that have sort of emerged, surprisingly, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, quickly, let's go ahead and let's just kind of review these other pass players that we have this week without going into too much detail. Drew, who are your other 2 pass players that you have for the week?
I only had one other one because I went over Christian Kirk and Michael Pittman Jr. So my third one was just going to be Dallas Goedert. So I just keep it as short and sweet. I mean, he was the tight end 15 without AJ Brown last week on a whopping 4 targets. So the Saints have been middle of the pack against the tight end, but assuming AJ Brown's back, I just don't see Dallas Goedert being a tight end 1 this year. I'd rather have guys like Pat Freiermuth, Hunter Henry over him, and I'd even consider Mike Gesicki if T. Higgins is out again as well. So I just if you're in a 12-team league, I think you can do better than Goddard at tight end.
All right, Nate.
Yeah, I'm passing on Jalen Waddle against Seattle secondary. We know how devastating they can be. I think the more devastating part is Skylar Thompson. Design touches will go to Tyreek Hill. I think that's a given. I worry about just the overall receiving yard upside, touchdown upside. It's going to be a run heavy game. I think Devin Achane is in line for another ridiculous workload. Just don't like any Skylar Thompson led offense, especially trying to feed 2 wide receivers. So it's Tyreek, it's Achane, it's not Jalen Waddle. And then you want my other one? real quick.
Sure. Quickly.
Mike Evans. Mike Evans against Denver. Denver pass DP. Yeah, they still yet to allow a receiving touchdown to opposing wide receivers. Pat Surtain will likely have all of Mike Evans. Last week we saw he only had 3 receptions, 42 yards on 6 targets against Detroit's secondary. I think this is another one of those slot games that they look at Chris Godwin. I'm not saying fade Evans. I'm just saying temper expectations.
Right. Sounds good for me. And for me, my 2 other smash pass players I have. First off, George Pickens. Looking at George Pickens in that matchup this week against the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are giving up 37% lower than the league average for average fantasy points this week. There's been inconsistent quarterback play. Justin Fields missed him on a couple of deep throws last week, so he was much closer to a big end than what he actually is. But when you have a quarterback that can't always hit you, it makes it difficult for me to trust you fully. And then there's Sam Laporta. Let's be honest, that offense seems to be consolidating around Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams as of right now. And the Arizona Cardinals have been very stingy against tight ends and have given up 55% less fantasy points than the rest of the league at the tight end position so far this year. So those are my past plays on that. And I will say this as well with Sam Laporta. Those weeks are coming. Stay the course. Don't panic trade him. Don't drop him. Don't do anything like that. It's going to come around. Me and Nate were talking. It seems like more of a George Kittle role where he's going to have his weeks. You just can't rely on it every week like you did last year. So really quickly, guys, go ahead and give me one guy that you are currently stashing. And by a stash player, we mean someone who is rostered and under 50% of sleeper leagues. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, so I would assume this number would go up after the week you just had. And we're technically, just for full transparency, we're recording this on a Tuesday night. It's going to air on a Wednesday night. So your waivers have already ran, but I don't have those updated numbers. But as of right now, Hunter Henry is 22% rostered at the time of this recording. And he's basically the wide receiver 1 for the Patriots. And I don't think that that's going to change until they make the switch to Drake May. I do think that once Drake May comes in, they'll push the ball downfield a little bit more. And it'll be less Hunter Henry. But as long as Jacoby Beef Brisket is the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots, Hunter Henry's been first on the team in first read targets. He's first in first downs per route run. He's first in yards per route run. The offense isn't very expiring, but whenever you look at the tight end position, you can do much worse with the volume that he's seeing and how involved he is in the offense. So as long as Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback, I think you could feel good firing up Hunter Henry. And he's a tight end 1 for me this week. So depending on your situation, like you can grab him off waivers this week and immediately plug him into your lineup.
Nate?
Mine is Ty Chandler. He was one of I drafted him in many leagues. Don't have the heart to drop him. I know that it seems like it's an Aaron Jones led backfield. I think it's a little bit more 1A, 1B- there a little bit. He's super explosive at times. 10 carries last week, 82 yards, 25-yard run on as an explosive run. We saw the one thing is I'd rather be a week early than a week late. And I think that Aaron Jones has shown durability issues. If Aaron Jones is out at any point during the season, Ty Chandler immediately slots into someone that I'm going to have guaranteed as my RB2 with potential for RB1 upside if that offense continues to roll through Sam Darnold.
And for me, I'm just going to go ahead and give us another Minnesota Viking this week. Let's talk a little bit of Jalen Naylor, guys. Things look bad in Minnesota right now in terms of injuries. There's no TJ Hawkinson. Jordan Addison struggling with injury. So contingent upon if Jordan Addison plays or not. Jalen Naylor last week played 93% of snaps for the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
He had 3 catches, 54 yards. He's had a touchdown in each of these first 2 weeks. Now, I know we don't want to be touchdown-dependent analysis people. But that being said, with Sam Darnold having trusted him to go to him in the first 2 weeks to catch touchdowns, you have to think that if Jordan Addison is not playing, there's going to be some growing confidence there, and there could be more of an increased target share for Jalen Naylor this week. And to top it off, he's practically free because as of Tuesday night, he is rostered in only 4% of sleeper leagues. So if you're looking for a sneaky upside play that you possibly get for pretty cheap for fab, I think Jalen Naylor could be one of those guys for you. So guys, that is it. Another one in the books. We'll be back next week. Once again, talking about smash, pass, and stash players. And we gave you a little taste tonight, but we're going to go ahead and do it next week. The return of our favorite segment, Master Debation. But before we leave here, let's just give you a quick sign out. My man Nate Markham can be found on X/Twitter at Nate Markham. Drew can be found at Drew3MR, and I can be found at RManuel Sports on Twitter. And of course, you can find all of our content at Fantasy and Frames on Twitter. For Nate, for Drew, I am Rhett, and as always, toodles.
This should be played at high volume.